The deafening crack of rock against steel echoed through the narrow mine shaft as Josie Sinclair swung her pickaxe with all the strength her 20-year-old frame could muster. Sweat streamed down her dirt-smeared face, stinging her eyes as she blinked away the grit. 6 hours into her shift, and her arms felt like lead weights, but she couldn't stop not when 3 hungry siblings waited in their small cabin on the outskirts of Florence, Colorado. The year was 1878, and the mining town of Florence was booming with coal production. Men coughed and cursed in the darkness around her, their lamp-lit silhouettes moving like ghosts through the dusty air. Josie was the only woman down in these depths, a fact that had caused quite the stir when she'd first demanded work from the reluctant foreman 3 months ago. Miss Sinclair. The gravelly voice of Mr. Peterson, the shift supervisor, carried over the cacophony of mining. "Your section needs to yield another half-ton before day's end," Josie straightened her aching back. "Yes, sir," she called back, adjusting the bandana covering her nose and mouth. The cloth did little to filter the coal dust that coated her lungs a little more each day. She thought of her siblings Emma, 12, Daniel, 10, and little Sarah, just 7. They'd been orphaned 8 months ago when influenza took both their parents within days of each other. As the eldest, Josie had sold nearly everything they owned to keep food on the table. When that money ran dry, she'd cut her hair short, donned her father's old work clothes, and marched straight to the coal mine. "Lady like you shouldn't be down here," mumbled old Frank, a grizzled miner who worked the adjacent section. "It ain't natural. Neither is letting children starve," Josie replied curtly, swinging her pickaxe with renewed determination. The throbbing pain in her hands was nothing compared to the memory of Daniel's hollow cheeks just a few months prior. The shift bell finally rang at 6 o'clock, signaling the end of the workday. Josie's muscles screamed in protest as she gathered her tools and joined the slow procession of men trudging toward the mine's entrance. Daylight had already begun to fade when she emerged from the shaft, her face and clothes blackened with coal dust. The paymaster sat at his usual table near the entrance, counting out meager wages to the line of exhausted workers. When Josie's turn came, he counted out $4.25 her pay for 6 grueling days. "Miss Sinclair," he said with a nod, his tone carrying the same discomfort it always did when addressing a female miner. "Thank you, Mr. Winters," she replied, carefully tucking the money into the inner pocket of her worn jacket. This would be enough for flour, beans, and perhaps some salt pork. If she was careful, maybe even a bit of sugar for Emma's upcoming birthday. As she turned to leave, she nearly collided with a tall stranger standing just behind her. Josie stumbled backward, startled by his unexpected presence. "Pardon me, madam," he said, steadying her with a gentle hand on her elbow. His voice carried a slight drawl that marked him as not from these parts. Josie looked up into the face of a man she'd never seen before. He stood at least a head taller than she did, with sun-bronzed skin and eyes the color of a summer sky. His clothes, a dark wool coat over a simple shirt, denim pants, and well-worn boots weren't fancy, but they were clean and of good quality. The Stetson hat pushed back on his head revealed light brown hair with sun-bleached streaks. "No harm done," she muttered, self-conscious of her filthy appearance. She tried to step around him, but he shifted slightly, blocking her path. "Yates Turner," he introduced himself with a slight tip of his hat. "Just arrived in town." Josie hesitated. She wasn't in the habit of chatting with strange men, especially not when she was exhausted and needed to get home to start dinner for the children. "Josie Sinclair," she replied curtly. "If you'll excuse me, I need to be going." "Of course," he said, stepping aside. But as she passed, he added, "Miss Sinclair, I couldn't help noticing you coming out of the mine. That's unusual work for a woman." She paused, bristling. "I do what needs doing, Mr. Turner. Good day to you." As she walked away, she could feel his eyes following her. Just another man judging her choices, she thought bitterly. Florence was full of the men who believed a woman's place was in the home, not earning wages like a man. But none of them had offered to feed her siblings when she'd found herself suddenly responsible for 3 young children. The walk to her family's cabin took nearly 30 minutes, leading away from the bustle of the mining camp and through scattered stands of pine trees. By the time Josie reached the small clearing where their home stood, the sky had darkened to deep indigo, smoke curled from the chimney, and warm light spilled from the single window. Emma had followed instructions and started the fire. Good girl, Josie's home. Daniel's shout preceded the cabin door flying open. He raced toward her, all gangly limbs and boundless energy despite the hardships they'd faced. Careful, she warned, laughing despite her fatigue. I'm filthy. We're used to it, he replied, grabbing her free hand and pulling her toward the cabin. Emma made soup from the ham bone, and she let me help chop the potatoes. Inside, the one-room cabin was warm and filled with the savory scent of soup. Emma stood at the small wood stove, her brown hair pulled back in a neat braid, looking so much like their mother that it made Josie's heart ache. You're late, Emma said, but her worried expression softened into relief. We were getting concerned. The paymaster's line was long today, Josie explained, setting down her lunch pail and small tool bag. Sarah, come give your big sister a hello. Sarah peered over the edge of the bed they all shared, her thumb in her mouth, a habit that had returned after their parents' deaths. She climbed down and crossed the room to wrap her arms around Josie's legs. You smell bad, she declared with the brutal honesty of a 7-year-old. That I do, Josie agreed with a tired smile. Let me wash up and then we'll eat. She moved to the wash basin in the corner, stripped off her filthy jacket, and began the lengthy process of scrubbing coal dust from her skin. The cold water stung the splits in her chapped hands, but she welcomed the pain as a sign she was coming clean. How much longer will you have to work in the mine, Josie? Emma asked quietly as she stirred the soup. Josie paused mid-scrub. It was a question Emma had asked before and one Josie had no good answer for. As long as we need the money, Em. But Mrs. Henderson at church says it isn't proper. Mrs. Henderson has a husband with a store, Josie replied, trying to keep the bitterness from her voice. We have to make do with what we have. After dinner, when the younger children were asleep in the bed they all shared, Josie sat by the dying fire with Emma, mending a tear in Daniel's only pair of school trousers. I heard you coughing again last night, Emma said suddenly. The mine dust is bad for you. Josie threaded her needle carefully, avoiding her sister's worried gaze. I'm fine, Emma, just a little cough. Everyone at the mine has it. And lots of miners die young from it, Emma insisted. At 12, she was far too observant and had grown up too quickly these past months. Mrs. Dawson's husband couldn't even walk across the room without gasping by the time he died, and he was only 32. That's enough, Josie said firmly. I don't need you worrying about things you can't change. We're surviving, and that's what matters. Emma fell silent, but her troubled expression remained. Josie sighed, setting down her mending to take her sister's hand. I promise I'm being careful, she said more gently, and it won't be forever. Once I've saved enough for Daniel's new boots and your winter coat, I'll look for different work. You always say that, Emma whispered. Josie had no reply because her sister was right. There were precious few jobs for women in Florence that paid anywhere near what she earned at the mine. The alternatives, working at the saloon or taking in laundry, wouldn't keep food on the table for 4 people. That night, lying awake beside her sleeping siblings, Josie stared at the cabin's rough-hewn ceiling and allowed herself a rare moment of self-pity. At 20, she should be thinking about courtship and her own future. Instead, she was playing mother to 3 children, her body aching from labor that aged her beyond her years. Just keep going, she whispered to herself, the same words she'd repeated like a prayer since the day they'd buried their parents. Just keep going. Morning came too quickly, as it always did. Josie rose before dawn, stirred the banked coals in the stove, and put coffee on to boil. She tied back her short brown hair, now grown to just below her ears, and splashed cold water on her face to banish the last vestiges of sleep. She woke the children, supervised their dressing and washing, and laid out a simple breakfast of cornmeal mush sweetened with the last of their molasses. As they ate, she gave them their instructions for the day. Emma, make sure Daniel and Sarah get to school on time. There's stew left from last night for your lunch. Daniel, no wandering off after school. Come straight home and help Emma with the chores. Sarah, mind your teacher today. No daydreaming. Yes, Josie, they chorused, the routine so familiar they barely looked up from their breakfast. Josie took a last swig of coffee, wrapped a chunk of corn bread in a cloth for her lunch, and shrugged into her father's old jacket. "I should be home by 7, she told them, as she did every morning. "If I'm not, Emma knows what to do." She kissed each of them goodbye, lingering a moment with Sarah, who still sometimes cried when she left. Today, the little girl was dry-eyed but solemn as she clung to Josie's neck. "Be good today, sweet pea," Josie murmured, pressing her lips to Sarah's forehead. "I'll see you tonight." The walk to the mine in the pre-dawn darkness was lonely but peaceful. Josie treasured these quiet moments before the deafening noise and crushing pressure of the day's work began. She watched the eastern sky lighten to a pale lavender as she walked, breathing deeply of the crisp mountain air before she'd have to exchange it for the suffocating atmosphere of the mine. She was nearly to the mine entrance when she spotted a familiar tall figure leaning against a tree, seemingly waiting for someone. When he straightened at her approach, Josie realized with a jolt of annoyance that the someone was her. "Good morning, Miss Sinclair," Yates Turner greeted her, touching the brim of his hat. Josie nodded curtly but didn't slow her pace. "Mr. Turner," he fell into step beside her, his long legs easily matching her brisk stride. "I was hoping to catch you before you went down." "Why?" she asked bluntly, sparing him a sideways glance. "I'd like to talk to you about a proposition." Josie stopped abruptly and turned to face him, her expression hardening. "Mr. Turner, I don't know what you've heard about me, but I'm not interested in any proposition from a man I just met yesterday." To her surprise, his face flushed red beneath his tan. "No, madam, nothing like that. I meant a business proposition." He cleared his throat. "I own a cattle ranch about 20 miles south of here, 3,000 acres with a herd of nearly 500 head. "Good for you," Josie said, resuming her walk toward the mine entrance, where miners were already gathering for the morning shift. "What does that have to do with me?" "I need a housekeeper," he said, keeping pace with her. "Someone to cook meals, keep the place tidy. It's just me and 2 ranch hands in the main house, and we're making a mess of things." Josie snorted. "So find yourself a wife, Mr. Turner." "I'm offering good wages," he continued as if she hadn't spoken. $8 a week, plus room and board for you and your siblings." That stopped her in her tracks. $8 was nearly double what she made at the mine, and without the cost of feeding 4 people or maintaining their cabin. "How do you know about my siblings?" she asked suspiciously. He had the grace to look slightly abashed. "I asked around town about you yesterday after we met. The storekeeper, Mr. Benson, told me about your situation." "Did he now?" Josie felt a flash of indignation that her family's circumstances were apparently common knowledge, to be shared with any stranger who asked. "He spoke highly of you," Yates added quickly. "Said you're the most determined young woman he's ever met. Said your parents would be proud." The unexpected compliment cut through Josie's defenses, and she felt a treacherous prickling behind her eyes. She blinked rapidly and looked away. "Why me?" she asked when she trusted herself to speak again. "There must be plenty of women in town who'd jump at such an offer." Yates shrugged. "Maybe, but I need someone reliable and hardworking, someone who won't quit when things get difficult. From what I've seen and heard, that's you." The shift bell clanged, signaling 5 minutes until the miners would descend. "I need to go," Josie said. "Think about it," Yates urged. "I'll be in town until tomorrow afternoon. I'm staying at the boarding house on Pine Street." Josie hesitated, then gave a quick nod. "I'll consider it." Down in the mine, as she swung her pickaxe and loaded coal into carts, Josie turned Yates Turner's offer over and over in her mind. $8 a week. No more coal dust filling her lungs, no more aching muscles and split hands. A real roof over their heads, not the leaking cabin they currently occupied. It sounded too good to be true, which made her suspicious. What was the catch? Was the ranch actually failing? Was Turner himself difficult to work for? Or worse, did he have expectations beyond housekeeping? But as the day wore on and her body protested every movement, the offer became more and more tempting. Emma's words from the night before echoed in her mind. "The mine dust is bad for you." By mid-afternoon, a new worry had taken hold. If she accepted, they would be isolated on a ranch 20 miles from town. What about the children's schooling? What if one of them fell ill and needed a doctor? The questions tumbled through her mind, distracting her from her work. She didn't notice the loose rock overhead until a sharp crack split the air. "Look out!" Someone shouted. Josie looked up just in time to see a chunk of ceiling breaking away directly above her. She tried to leap backward, but her foot caught on a rail tie. As she fell, something struck her shoulder with crushing force, sending waves of pain radiating down her arm. She wasn't sure how long she lay there, dust filling her lungs as she gasped for air. Hands were suddenly grabbing her, pulling her upright, voices asking if she was hurt. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her left shoulder throbbed with each heartbeat. "Just caught me by surprise." The foreman insisted she sit out the rest of her shift in the medicine shack near the mine entrance. The company doctor, really just an old miner with some experience in setting bones, examined her shoulder with rough hands. "Not broken," he pronounced. "Badly bruised. You'll want to rest it for a few days." Josie nearly laughed. Rest wasn't a luxury she could afford. "I'll be back tomorrow," she told him. The doctor shrugged. "Suit yourself, but you'll be no good to anyone if you can't lift your arm." By the time she reached home that evening, her shoulder had stiffened to the point that she could barely move it. Emma took one look at her pale face and sat her down by the fire. "What happened?" she demanded, carefully helping Josie remove her jacket. "Small cave-in," Josie admitted. "Nothing serious, just caught my shoulder." Emma's face went white. "You could have been killed." "But I wasn't," Josie said with forced brightness. "And I have news, I've been offered another job." As she explained Yates Turner's proposition, she watched hope and wariness battle in Emma's expression. "It sounds wonderful," her sister said cautiously, "but can we trust him?" "We don't know anything about him." "That's true," Josie acknowledged. "But I thought I might go to his ranch tomorrow, see the place before deciding. I can't work tomorrow anyway with this shoulder." Daniel, who had been quietly listening, piped up. "A real ranch?" "With horses and cattle and everything," Josie smiled at his excitement. "Apparently so." "I want to go too," he exclaimed. "Please, Josie, we'll see," she hedged. "First I need to speak with Mr. Turner again." The next morning, after seeing the younger children off to school with strict instructions to come straight home afterward, Josie walked to the boarding house on Pine Street. Her shoulder still ached fiercely, but she held her head high as she asked the proprietor, Mrs. Fenton, to inform Mr. Turner he had a visitor. Yates appeared quickly, his face lighting up when he saw her. "Miss Sinclair, I hoped you'd come. I'm here to ask some questions," she said, getting straight to the point, "before I can consider your offer properly." "Of course," he agreed readily. "Shall we sit on the porch? It's a fine morning." They settled in two rocking chairs on the boarding house's wide front porch. Josie was aware of curious glances from passers-by. A young, unmarried woman conversing with a single man was sure to set tongues wagging in a small town like Florence. "First," she began, "I need to know about schooling for my siblings. The younger ones are still of school age." Yates nodded. "There's a schoolhouse about 5 miles from the ranch. Several neighboring families send their children there. My ranch hand, Joe Carson, has 2 boys who attend. His wife could take your siblings along with their children. And church, same situation. There's a small church near the school. Services every Sunday." Josie considered this. "What about medical care? If one of us were to fall ill?" "Doc Williams visits the area once a month, and he's just half a day's ride away in Cannon City if there's an emergency. I also have some medical knowledge myself, served as a medic in the war." She looked at him with new interest. "You fought in the war," he nodded, a shadow crossing his face. "Union Army. I was 19 when I enlisted in '63, saw action at Chattanooga and in the Atlanta campaign." Josie did some quick mental arithmetic. That would make him about 34 now, 14 years her senior, but not unreasonably so. "You're from the East then?" she asked. "Pennsylvania originally, came west after the war like a lot of men. Worked cattle drives in Texas, saved every penny and finally bought my own spread 3 years ago." His pride was evident in his voice. "And you live there alone, no family?" A brief flicker of something regret, crossed his features. "Just me and my ranch hands, had a wife once back east. She died of typhoid while I was at war." "I'm sorry," Josie said softly, understanding his loss all too well. He shrugged slightly. "It was a long time ago." They sat in silence for a moment, the only sound the creaking of their rocking chairs and the distant clatter of a wagon passing on the main street. "I'd like to see the ranch," Josie finally said. "Before I make any decision." Yates brightened immediately. "I was hoping you'd say that." I can take you today if you'd like. We could be there by early afternoon and still get you back to town before dark." Josie hesitated. Proper etiquette dictated a young woman shouldn't ride alone with a man she barely knew. But then again, proper young women didn't work in coal mines either. "My brother asked to come along," she said. "He's quite excited about the idea of a real ranch." "The more the merrier," Yates replied with an easy smile. "I'll rent a buggy from the livery. Shall I pick you up at your home in an hour?" They agreed on the arrangements, and Josie hurried home to change into her one decent dress, a navy blue cotton that had been her mother's, and that she had carefully altered to fit her slimmer frame. She brushed her short hair until it shone and pinched her pale cheeks to bring some color to them. Emma watched these preparations with a knowing look. "He's handsome, isn't he?" she asked slyly. Josie threw a dish towel at her sister. "This is about a job opportunity, nothing more, if you say so," Emma replied, clearly unconvinced. "But I saw how you fussed with that collar 3 times." Before Josie could retort, there was a knock at the door. Daniel, who had been watching impatiently out the window, flung it open. "Mr. Turner," he exclaimed, "do you really have 500 cows?" "Daniel," Josie scolded, embarrassed by his forwardness, "mind your manners." Yates just laughed. "I do indeed have about that many, young man, and 24 horses as well. Do you like horses?" Daniel's eyes widened. "Yes, sir. I've only ever seen the ones that pull the coal wagons, but I think they're magnificent." "Well then, you'll have to meet my gelding, Thunder. He's tied up outside right now." Daniel looked to Josie for permission, which she granted with a nod. As he dashed outside, Yates turned his attention to her and Emma. "Miss Sinclair," he greeted Josie with a small bow. His eyes lingered on her for a moment, taking in her transformed appearance. "You look lovely." Josie felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. This is my sister, Emma." Emma curtsied politely. "Pleased to meet you, Mr. Turner." "The pleasure is mine," he replied. "Your sister tells me you're quite the responsible young lady." Emma straightened proudly. "I do my best to help." "Will you be joining us today?" Yates asked her. Emma shook her head. "Someone needs to be here when Sarah gets home from school, and besides," she added with a mischievous glance at Josie, "I thought it best to let Josie form her own impressions without me hovering about." Josie shot her sister a warning look, which Emma pretended not to notice. The journey to the Turner Ranch took just over 2 hours in the rented buggy. Daniel sat between Josie and Yates on the seat, peppering the rancher with questions about cattle, horses, and life on the range. Yates answered each query with good-humored patience, occasionally glancing over the boy's head to share an amused look with Josie. As they traveled, the landscape changed gradually from the more populated mining region around Florence to open-range country. Rolling hills covered in late summer grass stretched to the horizon, broken occasionally by stands of pine and aspen. In the distance, the majestic peaks of the Sangre de Cristo Mountains rose against the blue Colorado sky. "It's beautiful out here," Josie murmured, taking in the expansive vistas. "That it is," Yates agreed. "First time I saw this land, I knew I was home." They crested a gentle rise, and he pointed ahead. "There it is, Turner Ranch." Josie leaned forward, eager for her first glimpse of what might become their new home. In a broad valley below, a cluster of buildings nestled alongside a winding creek lined with cottonwoods. The main house was a substantial 2-story structure built of squared logs, with a wide porch wrapping around the front. Nearby stood a large barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Corrals and fenced pastures surrounded the complex, and in the nearest field several horses grazed peacefully. "You built all this in just 3 years?" Josie asked, impressed despite herself. Yates shook his head. "The original homestead was already here, the main house and barn. I've added to it since then. Built the bunkhouse last summer when I hired more hands." As they approached, a dog began barking, alerting the household to their arrival. By the time Yates guided the buggy into the yard, 2 men had emerged from one of the outbuildings. "That's Joe Carson and Miguel Ortiz," Yates explained. "My foreman and head wrangler." The men approached, curiosity evident on their faces as they took in the visitors. Joe Carson was a weathered man in his 40s with a thick mustache and kind eyes. Miguel was younger, perhaps in his late 20s, with a quick smile that revealed a missing front tooth. "Boss," Joe greeted Yates with a nod. "Didn't expect you back so soon." Brought some guests, Yates replied, helping Josie down from the buggy while Daniel scrambled down on his own. Miss Josie Sinclair and her brother Daniel. Miss Sinclair is considering taking on the housekeeper position, understanding dawned on Joe's face. Well now, that's fine news. The place could surely use a woman's touch. He tipped his hat to Josie. Madam, Mr. Carson, Josie acknowledged him. Mr. Yates mentioned you have children who attend the local school. Yes, madam, my boys, Thomas and John. My wife takes them each day by wagon. And this must be the young man of the family, Miguel said to Daniel, extending his hand. Do you like horses, amigo? Daniel nodded enthusiastically, shaking the offered hand. Very much, sir. Then you must meet our new foal, Miguel said. Born just 3 days ago. Would you like to see her? Daniel looked to Josie for permission, bouncing on his toes in anticipation. Go ahead, she said, smiling at his excitement. But mind Mr. Ortiz's instructions. As Miguel led Daniel toward the barn, Joe excused himself to return to his work, leaving Josie alone with Yates. Shall I show you the house? He asked. The main house was larger than it had appeared from a distance. A central great room served as both parlor and dining area, with a massive stone fireplace dominating one wall. The kitchen was spacious, with a large iron cookstove, a pump bringing water directly inside, and ample cupboards and workspace. Upstairs were 4 bedrooms, a master bedroom for Yates, and 3 smaller rooms that would easily accommodate Josie and her siblings. The furnishings aren't fancy, Yates apologized as they toured, but everything's sturdy and well made. Josie ran her hand over a solid oak table in the dining area. It's much nicer than what we have now, she assured him. The house was clean, but showed signs of bachelor living, mismatched dishes stacked haphazardly in cupboards, sparse decorations, and a general lack of the touches that made a house feel like a home. Joe's wife, Martha, comes by once a week to do some cleaning, Yates explained, but she has her own household to manage. We mostly fend for ourselves. As they completed the tour, Yates led Josie back out to the porch, where 2 rocking chairs similar to those at the boarding house sat facing the yard. They settled into them, watching as Daniel emerged from the barn with Miguel, his face alight with joy. He seems to be enjoying himself, Yates observed. Daniel has always loved animals, Josie said. In town, he has to make do with befriending stray cats and the occasional dog. They sat in companionable silence for a moment before Yates spoke again. I want to be clear about something, Miss Sinclair. If you take this position, you and your siblings would be treated as family, not as servants. You'd have your own rooms, freedom to arrange the household as you see fit, and days off to visit town or attend social gatherings. Josie studied his earnest expression. That's generous. It's practical, he countered. I need someone who'll stay, someone who'll make this house a home. That won't happen if you're treated as hired help. His words stirred something in Josie, a longing for home and stability that she'd suppressed since her parents' deaths. The ranch, with its solid buildings and open spaces, represented a chance at a new beginning, away from the dangers and drudgery of the mine, but caution still held her back. I appreciate your candor, Mr. Turner, but I must be equally frank. My priority is my siblings' welfare. If I were to accept your offer and things didn't work out, we'd be stranded far from town with no resources. Yates nodded thoughtfully, a fair concern. What if I advance you 2 weeks' wages? That would give you a cushion if you needed to return to Florence. Josie was surprised by the offer. That's very trusting of you, he shrugged. I'm a good judge of character, Miss Sinclair. I don't think you're the type to take advantage. Daniel's laughter floated across the yard as Miguel showed him how to throw a lasso. The sound tugged at Josie's heart. It had been too long since she'd heard her brother laugh with such abandon. When would you want us to start? She asked, the question itself revealing her inclination. Yates tried to hide his pleased smile, but his eyes crinkled at the corners. Whenever you're ready, next week. That would give you time to pack up and make arrangements in town. Josie took a deep breath, weighing the opportunity against the risks one final time. The memory of yesterday's accident in the mine flashed through her mind, the terrifying crack of breaking rock, the crushing pain in her shoulder. How long before a more serious accident occurred? How long before the coal dust permanently damaged her lungs? All right, Mr. Turner, she said, extending her hand formally. I accept your offer. His hand enveloped hers, warm and calloused from ranch work. "You won't regret it, Miss Sinclair, I promise you that." The journey back to Florence was filled with Daniel's excited chatter about everything he'd seen at the ranch. Josie smiled at his enthusiasm but felt a flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Had she made the right decision? How would Emma and Sarah react to the news? As the buggy pulled up to their cabin in the early evening, Emma and Sarah burst out the door to greet them. Sarah flung herself into Josie's arms while Emma hung back, her anxious eyes searching her sister's face for clues. "We're going to live on a ranch," Daniel announced before Josie could speak. "Mr. Turner has horses and cows and a dog named Scout and Daniel," Josie interrupted gently. "Let me explain to your sisters properly." Inside the cabin, Josie introduced Yates to Sarah, who regarded him shyly from behind Emma's skirt. Then, while Yates entertained the younger children with stories about life on the ranch, Josie pulled Emma aside to speak privately. "I've accepted his offer," she told her sister. "We'll move to the ranch next week." Emma's expression was guarded. "Are you sure about this, Josie? It's so sudden." "I know," Josie acknowledged. "But the opportunity is too good to pass up. You should see the house, real bedrooms for each of us, a kitchen twice the size of this whole cabin, and no more mine work for me." At the mention of the mine, Emma's resistance softened. "That part does sound wonderful." "But what about school for Daniel and Sarah?" Josie explained about the local school and the arrangement with Mrs. Carson. She described the ranch, the beautiful countryside, and the fresh start it offered them all. "And Mr. Turner himself?" Emma asked pointedly. "What kind of man is he?" Josie felt her cheeks grow warm under her sister's shrewd gaze. "He seems honorable. The ranch hands respect him. He's offering fair wages and good conditions." "That's not what I meant," Emma said, a knowing smile playing at her lips. "He's handsome and he looks at you like you hung the moon." "Don't be ridiculous," Josie protested, though her heart skipped a beat at Emma's observation. "This is a business arrangement, nothing more." Emma raised her eyebrows skeptically but didn't press the point. "If you believe this is best for us, then I trust your judgment, Josie." "You haven't steered us wrong yet." The week that followed was a flurry of activity. Josie gave notice at the mine, sold what furniture they couldn't take with them, and packed their meager belongings. Word spread quickly through Florence about the Sinclair family's impending departure, and neighbors stopped by to wish them well and offer small parting gifts: a jar of preserves, a bundle of candles, a hand-knitted scarf for Sarah. Mr. Benson at the general store was particularly supportive. "That Turner fellow is a good man," he assured Josie when she came to settle their account. "Honest in his dealings. Pays his bills on time. You're making a smart choice, Miss Sinclair." On the morning of their departure, Josie stood in the doorway of the cabin that had been their home since childhood, feeling a strange mixture of sadness and relief. The place held so many memories: her mother teaching her to bake bread at the small stove, her father's booming laugh as he told stories by the fire, the quiet evenings after her parents' deaths when she'd held her siblings close and promised them everything would be all right. But it also represented struggle and hardship: cold winter nights when the wind whistled through the chinks in the logs, the constant worry about money, the backbreaking work that had aged her beyond her years. "Ready?" Emma asked softly, coming to stand beside her. Josie nodded. "It's time for a new chapter." Yates arrived with a wagon for their belongings and the same buggy they'd used before. The children climbed eagerly into the buggy, but Josie lingered, taking one last look around the cabin. "Having second thoughts?" Yates asked, approaching cautiously. Josie shook her head. "Just saying goodbye. This was my parents' home. It's hard to leave it behind." Yates's expression softened with understanding. "Home isn't just a place, Miss Sinclair. It's the people who fill it with love. You're bringing the most important part with you." His words touched her deeply, and she blinked back unexpected tears. Yes, you're right." The journey to the ranch seemed shorter this time, perhaps because Josie's mind was occupied with thoughts of the future. By early afternoon, the familiar buildings came into view, and a small welcoming committee had gathered in the yard: Joe and Miguel, along with a plump, friendly-looking woman who must be Martha Carson, and two boys who bore a strong resemblance to Joe. "Welcome home," Yates said quietly as he brought the buggy to a halt. Home. The word echoed in Josie's mind as she helped Sarah down from the buggy. Could this place truly become home to them? Martha Carson engulfed Josie in a warm hug before she could even introduce herself properly. "I'm so pleased to meet you, dear. We've been in desperate need of a woman's touch around here. These men live like bears in a cave." Josie laughed, immediately warming to Martha's forthright manner. "I'm happy to help bring some civilization to the wilderness. I'll show you around properly, and then Joe will take your things up to your rooms," Martha continued, ushering Josie toward the house. "The boys can show Daniel and Sarah the creek. There are fish this time of year that practically jump into your hands." With Martha's efficient assistance, Josie and her siblings were settled into their new quarters by supper time. The two boys, Thomas and John, had indeed taken Daniel and Sarah to the creek, and all four children returned wet but happy, with 3 small trout that Miguel helped them clean for the evening meal. Josie cooked her first supper in her new kitchen, marveling at the well-stocked pantry and the modern cookstove. Emma helped set the large oak table with the mismatched dishes, arranging wildflowers from the yard in a blue crockery jug as a centerpiece. When the meal was ready, everyone gathered around the table, Yates at the head, Josie at the foot, with the children, Joe, Martha, and Miguel filling in between. It was the first time in months that the Sinclairs had shared a meal with others, and the table rang with conversation and laughter. As Josie looked around at the animated faces lit by the golden glow of oil lamps, a sense of rightness settled over her. This was what had been missing since their parents died: not just security or comfort, but community, connection. Later, after the children had been tucked into their new beds and the ranch hands had returned to the bunkhouse, Josie found herself alone on the porch with Yates. The night was clear, the sky a velvet canopy strewn with stars brighter than any she'd seen in Florence. "Thank you," she said simply. Yates, leaning against the porch railing, turned to look at her. "For what?" "For this opportunity, for bringing us here." He shook his head slightly. "No need for thanks. You're doing me the favor, Miss Sinclair. This place hasn't felt like a proper home since I built it." Tonight, for the first time, it did. Their eyes met in the dim light, and Josie felt a curious warmth spread through her chest. There was something in his gaze: admiration, certainly, but also a tentative hope that made her breath catch. Abruptly self-conscious, she looked away. "I should turn in. Tomorrow we'll be busy." "Of course," he said, straightening. "Sleep well, Miss Sinclair." "Good night, Mr. Turner," she replied, slipping inside. As she climbed the stairs to her bedroom, Josie told herself firmly that the fluttering in her stomach was simply excitement about their new start, nothing more. Yates Turner was her employer, and she was his housekeeper. That was all. But as she drifted off to sleep in her new room, with moonlight spilling through the curtainless window, his face was the last image in her mind. The next few weeks passed in a blur as the Sinclairs adjusted to ranch life. Josie quickly established a routine: early mornings, preparing breakfast for the household, then cleaning, laundry, and baking while the younger children attended school with the Carson boys. Emma, deemed old enough to have completed her formal education, stayed home to help Josie with household tasks and learn to cook and manage a larger home. Yates was often away during daylight hours, riding out with his men to check on cattle, mend fences, or handle the myriad tasks that kept the ranch running. But he was invariably present at the evening meal, freshly washed and wearing a clean shirt, his manner unfailingly courteous as he inquired about everyone's day. One evening in early October, after the children had gone upstairs and Emma was finishing the dishes, Yates approached Josie as she mended a tear in one of Daniel's shirts. "I've been meaning to ask," he began, settling into the chair opposite her. "How are you finding ranch life?" "Is it what you expected?" Josie set down her mending and considered the question. "It's different," she said honestly. "Quieter than town, but busier in its own way. There's always something that needs doing." "And the children, are they adjusting well?" Josie smiled. "Better than well. Daniel follows Miguel around like a second shadow whenever he's not in school, and Sarah has adopted every stray animal on the property. Even Emma seems happier. She's blossoming without the weight of worry she carried in Florence." "And you?" Yates asked, his blue eyes intent on her face. "Are you happy here, Josie?" It was the first time he had used her given name, and the intimacy of it sent a small thrill through her. "I am," she said softly, "happier than I've been since before my parents died." His smile transformed his face, erasing the lines of responsibility that usually marked his features. "I'm glad. That's all I wanted to know." From that evening on, a subtle shift occurred in their relationship. Yates began to linger after supper, helping Emma with her lessons or teaching Daniel to whittle, but always finding his way back to Josie's side before the evening ended. Sometimes they would sit on the porch, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill, talking about their childhoods or their hopes for the future. Other times they would remain in the great room, reading companionably by the fire, exchanging thoughts on books they had both enjoyed. Josie found herself looking forward to these quiet moments together, storing up observations or stories throughout the day to share with him. She learned that, beneath his capable, sometimes reserved exterior lay a thoughtful mind and a dry sense of humor that often caught her by surprise. For his part, Yates seemed to soften in her presence. The ranch hands noticed the change, exchanging knowing glances when their boss lingered at the house instead of joining them for their usual evening card games in the bunkhouse. One crisp Saturday in late October, Yates proposed a picnic. "The children have been working hard at school, and you and Emma deserve a day off from household duties," he told Josie over breakfast. "There's a spot by the creek, about a mile upstream, with a meadow full of late wildflowers. It would be a shame to miss them before the first frost." The idea of a day spent outdoors, away from chores, appealed to everyone. Martha contributed a jar of her famous pickles to the picnic basket that Josie and Emma packed with fried chicken, cornbread, apples, and a special treat, a chocolate cake that Emma had mastered under Josie's tutelage. Yates hitched 2 horses to a light wagon, and they set off mid-morning under a cloudless sky. The children rode in the back, singing trail songs that Daniel had learned from Miguel, while Josie and Yates sat side by side on the wagon seat. "You're good with them," Yates observed, nodding toward the children. "You'd have made a fine teacher." Josie was surprised by the comment. "I never considered teaching. After my parents died, there was only the question of how to keep us together and fed." "And now," Yates asked, "now that those immediate concerns are addressed, have you thought about what you might want for yourself?" The question caught Josie off guard. For so long, her own desires had been subordinated to the needs of her siblings. What did she want for herself? "I'm not sure," she admitted. "For now, I'm content with this new stability, with knowing the children are safe and thriving." Yates nodded, accepting her answer without pressing further, but Josie sensed a certain disappointment in his silence. They arrived at the picnic spot, a grassy clearing beside the creek, sheltered by cottonwoods whose golden leaves shimmered in the sunlight. True to Yates's promise, late wildflowers dotted the meadow, purple asters and yellow rabbit brush, creating splashes of color among the grasses. The children immediately dashed to the creek, where clear water burbled over smooth stones. Yates helped Josie spread a quilt on the ground while Emma unpacked the food. "It's beautiful here," Josie said, taking in the peaceful scene. "One of my favorite spots on the ranch," Yates agreed. "I come here sometimes when I need to think." The meal was a merry affair, with everyone's spirits lifted by the perfect weather and the rare leisure time. Afterward, Yates produced a ball from his saddlebag, and an impromptu game ensued, with even Emma setting aside her usual dignity to join in the fun. As the afternoon waned, Daniel and Sarah, tired from their exertions, stretched out on the quilt and soon fell asleep. Emma, engrossed in a book she had brought, sat with her back against a tree trunk, leaving Josie and Yates to themselves. "Walk with me," Yates suggested, offering his hand to help her up. They strolled along the creek bank, far enough away that their conversation wouldn't disturb the children but still within sight of the clearing. "Thank you for today," Josie said. "It's been wonderful to see everyone so carefree." "Including you?" Yates asked, glancing at her with a smile. "Including me," she acknowledged. "I didn't realize how much tension I'd been carrying until it was gone." They walked in comfortable silence for a few minutes, the only sounds the rustling of leaves overhead and the gentle murmur of the creek. "Josie," Yates said finally, stopping to face her. "There's something I've been wanting to talk to you about." His serious tone made her pulse quicken with sudden apprehension. "Is something wrong? Are you dissatisfied with my work?" "No, nothing like that," he hastened to assure her. "Your work is exemplary. The house has never run so smoothly, and everyone is happier than I can remember." Relief washed over her, followed by confusion. Then what is it? Yates took a deep breath as if gathering courage. When I offered you the position of housekeeper, my motivations were not entirely straightforward. Josie tensed. What do you mean? I mean that I'd noticed you before that day at the mine, he admitted. I'd seen you in town several times at church, at the general store. I asked about you, learned about your situation. When I approached you with the job offer, I already knew I wanted you in my home, not just as a housekeeper. Josie took a step back, uncertain whether to be flattered or alarmed. Mr. Turner, please let me finish, he said quickly. I'm making a mess of this. He raked a hand through his hair, a gesture of frustration she had come to recognize. What I'm trying to say is that while I genuinely needed a housekeeper, and while the offer was made in good faith, my hope was always that you might come to see me as more than an employer. That in time, perhaps, you might consider a more permanent arrangement. Understanding dawned on Josie, along with a flutter of something that might have been hope or fear or both. You're speaking of marriage. I am, he confirmed, his blue eyes steady on hers. I know it's soon, and I don't expect an immediate answer, but I wanted you to know my intentions, to understand that you and your siblings are not merely employees to me. I care for all of you, but especially for you, Josie. Josie's mind whirled with conflicting emotions. Part of her was stunned by the unexpected declaration, while another part whispered that perhaps she had known all along, had sensed the deeper current running beneath their cordial employer-employee relationship. I don't know what to say, she admitted. You don't need to say anything now, Yates assured her. I understand this is sudden. I only ask that you consider the possibility. She studied his face, the earnest blue eyes, the strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow of concern between his brows. In the weeks they had spent under the same roof, she had come to respect his integrity, his kindness toward her siblings, his quiet competence. And yes, if she was honest with herself, she had felt the stirrings of deeper feelings as well. But marriage. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and exhilarating. I need time, she said finally. Relief crossed his features. Of course, take all the time you need. Nothing changes unless you want it to. The walk back to the picnic site was quieter than their outward journey, both of them lost in thought. But as they neared the clearing, Yates gently touched her elbow, stopping her. Josie, he said softly, whatever you decide, please know that your position here is secure. You and the children have a home at Turner Ranch for as long as you wish, regardless of your answer. The sincerity in his voice brought unexpected tears to her eyes. Thank you, she whispered. The ride back to the ranch was subdued, the earlier merriment tempered by the weight of unspoken thoughts. Josie was acutely aware of Yates beside her, of the brush of his arm against hers when the wagon jolted over uneven ground, of the sidelong glances he cast in her direction when he thought she wasn't looking. That night, after the children were asleep, Josie sat by her bedroom window, gazing out at the star-filled sky. Marriage to Yates Turner would solve so many problems. It would provide permanent security for her siblings, give them a real home and a male figure in their lives who had already shown he cared for them. For herself, it would mean an end to uncertainty, to the constant worry about their future. But was that enough? Shouldn't marriage be based on love, not convenience or security? And yet, as she thought of Yates, his quiet strength, his consideration, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, she couldn't deny that her feelings for him had grown beyond mere gratitude or respect. There was an undeniable attraction, a comfort in his presence, a flutter in her stomach when their hands accidentally touched. Was that love? Or simply the natural response of a young woman to the first man who had shown her kindness after months of struggle? Josie didn't have an answer. But as she finally climbed into bed, she knew she couldn't rush this decision. It would affect not just her life but the lives of Emma, Daniel, and Sarah as well. The following days brought a subtle tension to the household. Josie and Yates maintained their usual courteous interactions, but there was a new awareness between them, an undercurrent that Emma, perceptive as always, quickly noticed. Did something happen at the picnic? She asked Josie as they kneaded bread dough side by side in the kitchen. Josie hesitated, then decided her sister deserved honesty. Mr. Turner has expressed interest in a more permanent arrangement. Emma's hands stilled on the dough. He proposed, in a manner of speaking. He said he would like me to consider marriage, but that he doesn't expect an immediate answer. A slow smile spread across Emma's face. I knew it, the way he looks at you when you're not watching, it's so obvious. Josie felt heat rise to her cheeks. Is it? To everyone but you, apparently, Emma teased. Then, growing serious, she asked, what did you tell him? That I need time to think, Josie replied, punching down her dough with perhaps more force than necessary. It's a big decision, Emma nodded thoughtfully. Do you have feelings for him? Josie sighed, setting aside the dough to rise. I think so, but everything has happened so quickly. 6 weeks ago, we were living in Florence and I was working in the mine. Now we're here and he's talking about marriage. It's overwhelming. But not unwelcome, Emma pressed. No, Josie admitted softly. Not unwelcome. Emma's smile returned. Then give yourself time. The right answer will come. November brought colder weather and the first snowfall of the season. The ranch settled into its winter rhythm. Cattle moved to sheltered pastures, repairs made to buildings, preparations begun for the long months ahead. School continued for the younger children, though Martha Carson now used a covered wagon for the daily journey, protecting the children from the elements. Josie found herself watching Yates more closely, noting the easy way he interacted with the ranch hands, the patience he showed when teaching Daniel to ride, the respect he commanded without ever raising his voice. He was a good man, she had no doubts about that. The question was whether they could build a life together, a true partnership rather than an arrangement of convenience. One evening in mid-November, after a day of steady snowfall had blanketed the ranch in white, Yates invited Josie to join him on the porch after the children were asleep. It's cold out, she protested. I've built up the fire in the brazier, he replied, and I have something to show you that's best seen from outside. Curious, Josie wrapped herself in a heavy shawl and followed him onto the porch. As promised, a brazier glowed with hot coals, providing a circle of warmth in the crisp night air. Look up, Yates instructed softly. Josie tilted her head back and gasped. The sky was ablaze with stars, more brilliant than she had ever seen them, their light reflected by the new fallen snow until the world seemed to glow with an ethereal radiance. It's magnificent, she breathed. It is, Yates agreed, though when she glanced at him, she found he was looking not at the stars but at her, his expression soft in the dim light. They stood in silence for a few minutes, Josie marveling at the beauty of the night, Yates seemingly content to watch her enjoyment. I've been thinking, he said finally, about what I said to you at the creek. I want you to know that while my feelings haven't changed, I understand if yours are different. You came here seeking a fresh start for your family, not a husband. Josie turned to face him fully. My hesitation isn't because I don't care for you, Yates. It was the first time she had used his given name, and she saw the spark of hope it kindled in his eyes. Then what is it? He asked gently. Josie struggled to articulate her concerns. I worry that gratitude might be coloring my judgment. That I might be confusing appreciation for deeper feelings. Yates nodded slowly. I can understand that. The last thing I want is for you to feel obligated. It's not obligation, Josie hurried to clarify. It's just, I've never courted before. I've never had the luxury to think about romance or marriage. After my parents died, there was only survival. And now, I'm not sure what I feel, she admitted. I know I respect you, I enjoy your company, I feel safe with you, which is something I haven't felt in a long time. Yates took a step closer, close enough that she could see the starlight reflected in his eyes. Respect, enjoyment, and safety are not bad foundations for a marriage, Josie. Many begin with less. But shouldn't there be more? She whispered. There can be, he said, his voice equally soft. In time. Snowflakes began to fall again, large, fluffy flakes that drifted lazily in the still air. One landed on Josie's cheek, and without thinking, Yates reached up to brush it away, his fingers lingering against her skin. The touch sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold. She found herself leaning slightly into his hand, drawn by a pull she couldn't name. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, Yates bent his head toward hers. When she didn't retreat, he closed the remaining distance and pressed his lips gently to hers. The kiss was brief, tender, a question more than a demand. As he drew back, Josie felt a rush of warmth spread from her lips throughout her body, banishing the November chill more effectively than any fire. I should go in, she said unsteadily. Yates nodded, stepping back to give her space. Of course. Good night, Josie. Good night, Yates, she replied, slipping through the door with her thoughts in turmoil. That night, lying in bed with her fingers pressed to lips that still tingled from his kiss, Josie faced the truth she had been avoiding. She was falling in love with Yates Turner. Perhaps had been since that first day on the porch of the boarding house, when he'd looked at her with such hope and determination. But was love enough? Marriage meant joining her life to his completely, entrusting not just her future but the futures of Emma, Daniel, and Sarah to his care. It was a tremendous responsibility, one she couldn't take lightly. As the days passed, Josie found herself increasingly drawn to Yates. Their evening conversations continued, sometimes joined by Emma or the younger children, sometimes just the two of them, talking long after the others had gone to bed. Occasionally, when they found themselves alone, he would kiss her again, always gently, always with a question in his eyes that she answered by not pulling away. December arrived, bringing with it preparations for Christmas, the first since their parents' deaths that the Sinclair children would celebrate properly. Josie threw herself into creating new traditions for their blended household, baking cookies with Sarah, helping Daniel and Emma decorate the great room with pine boughs and red ribbons. Yates entered into the spirit with enthusiasm, returning from a trip to town with gifts hidden in saddlebags and a small pine tree lashed to his horse. The entire household gathered to decorate it with paper ornaments the children had made in strings of dried berries and popcorn. As Christmas drew nearer, Josie came to a decision. On Christmas Eve, after the younger children had finally been persuaded to go to bed, with promises that morning would come sooner if they slept, she found herself alone with Yates by the fire. Emma had tactfully excused herself, claiming fatigue, though the knowing look she gave Josie on her way upstairs suggested her retreat was strategic rather than necessary. "It's been a wonderful day," Josie said, watching the play of firelight on Yates's profile as he added another log to the flames. "Thank you for making it special for the children. Our first Christmas together should be memorable," he replied, returning to sit beside her on the sofa. The phrase "first Christmas" hung in the air between them, laden with implication. Josie took a deep breath, gathering her courage. "Yates," she began, turning to face him, "I've been thinking about your proposal." His body tensed subtly, though his expression remained carefully neutral. And I've realized something," she continued, her heart pounding in her chest. "When I came here, I was looking for security for my family, a safe place for us to rebuild our lives. What I didn't expect was to find someone who would make me feel seen, valued. Not just for what I could do, but for who I am." Hope kindled in his eyes, but he remained silent, letting her find her words. "I was afraid I might be confusing gratitude with love," she admitted, "but these past weeks have shown me the difference. Gratitude doesn't make my heart race when you enter a room. It doesn't make me look forward to our conversations all day. It doesn't make me wonder what it would be like to be your wife." A smile began to spread across Yates's face. "Are you saying yes, Josie Sinclair?" Josie nodded, her own smile blooming to match his. "I am. If your offer still stands, I would be honored to become Mrs. Yates Turner." With a sound that was half laugh, half sigh of relief, Yates gathered her into his arms. "The honor is entirely mine," he murmured before capturing her lips in a kiss that held none of the hesitation of their previous encounters. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, Yates reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet pouch. "I've been carrying this around for weeks," he confessed, tipping a delicate gold ring with a single pearl into his palm. "It was my mother's. I had it sized for you in Cannon City last month, hoping—" "It's beautiful," Josie whispered as he slid it onto her finger. The pearl gleamed warmly in the firelight, its simplicity perfectly suited to her practical nature. "When?" Yates asked, his thumb gently rubbing the back of her hand where the ring now rested. "How soon can I make you my wife?" Josie considered. "Spring would be traditional." Yates's face fell slightly. "That's 4 months away." But Josie continued, unable to resist teasing him, "Since when have I been traditional? I did work in a coal mine after all." Hope returned to his expression. "What are you suggesting? New Year's Day," she proposed. "A new year, a new beginning for all of us." Yates's smile was radiant. "New Year's Day it is." The next morning, Christmas dawned bright and clear, the winter sun turning the snow-covered landscape into a sea of diamonds. Josie woke to the sound of excited whispers as Daniel and Sarah crept past her door, heading downstairs to see if Santa had visited during the night. She dressed quickly, eager to join the festivities, but pausing first to look at the pearl ring that now adorned her left hand. Today, they would announce their engagement to the children. The thought filled her with nervous anticipation. How would they react? Emma already suspected, of course, but Daniel and Sarah might be surprised. Downstairs, she found the younger children exclaiming over the filled stockings hanging from the mantel, while Yates and Emma exchanged amused glances from their respective seats by the fire. "Merry Christmas," Josie called as she descended the stairs. 4 faces turned toward her, all smiling, and Josie felt a surge of love so powerful it nearly overwhelmed her. This was her family, not just the siblings she had sacrificed so much to keep together, but also the man who had offered them a home and his heart, Josie. Sarah exclaimed, rushing to show her a candy cane extracted from her stocking. "Look what Santa brought." "Wonderful," Josie replied, accepting the sticky offering with a laugh. "Good morning, Yates." His eyes crinkled with suppressed mirth as he returned the greeting. "Good morning, Josie." "Sleep well." "Very," she assured him, their shared secret creating a bubble of happiness around them. After breakfast and the opening of gifts, handmade treasures from the children, practical items like books and warm scarves from Josie and Emma, and surprisingly thoughtful presents from Yates, including a beautiful silver hair comb for Josie that had belonged to his grandmother, Josie exchanged a meaningful look with Yates. "It was time. Children," Yates began, gathering them all near the fire. "Miss Josie and I have something to tell you." 3 pairs of eyes fixed on them with varying degrees of curiosity and, in Emma's case, barely concealed excitement. "Last night," Yates continued, taking Josie's hand in his, "I asked your sister to marry me, and she did me the great honor of accepting." There was a moment of stunned silence, broken by Sarah's puzzled question. "Does that mean you'll be our brother?" Yates laughed. "Not exactly, sweet pea. More like your brother-in-law, but most importantly, I'll be part of your family and you'll be part of mine." Daniel's brow furrowed in concentration as he processed this news. "Will we still live here at the ranch?" "Of course," Josie assured him. "This is our home now." "And will you be our father?" Sarah persisted, climbing onto Yates's lap with the easy familiarity she had developed over the past months. Yates's eyes met Josie's over the child's head, seeking guidance. Josie nodded slightly, giving her permission for whatever answer he deemed appropriate. "I could never replace your real father," Yates told Sarah gently, "but I would be honored to be a father to you if you would like that." Sarah considered this solemnly before nodding. "I think that would be all right. Can I call you Papa?" Yates's voice was husky with emotion as he replied, "I would like that very much, Sarah." Emma, who had remained quiet throughout this exchange, finally spoke. "When is the wedding to be?" "New Year's Day," Josie answered. "We thought it would be fitting to begin the year as a united family." Emma's smile was luminous. "That sounds perfect." The week between Christmas and New Year's passed in a flurry of preparations. Martha Carson and Emma took charge of transforming Josie's simple blue dress into a suitable wedding gown, adding lace at the collar and cuffs and tiny pearl buttons down the back. Joe rode to Cannon City to secure the services of the circuit preacher, who agreed to make a special trip to the ranch for the ceremony. Josie moved through these days in a haze of happiness, still scarcely able to believe the turn her life had taken. 6 months ago, she had been descending into a coal mine each day, her future as bleak as the tunnels she worked in. Now she was preparing to marry a man she loved, surrounded by family and new friends with a life of promise stretching before her. Yates, too, seemed transformed by their engagement. The reserve that had sometimes marked his manner fell away entirely, replaced by an open affection that extended not just to Josie, but to all the Sinclair siblings. He took Daniel riding almost daily, teaching him the basics of ranch work. He sat patiently with Sarah as she read haltingly from her primer, offering encouragement with each successfully decoded word. And he engaged Emma in thoughtful discussions about the books they both enjoyed, treating her ideas with the respect due to a young woman rather than a child. New Year's Eve arrived clear and cold. The ranch hands had spent the day cleaning and decorating the great room, transforming it with pine boughs, ribbon, and candles into a space worthy of a wedding. Martha supervised the preparation of a feast that would feed not just the ranch household, but also the half-dozen neighboring families who had been invited to the celebration. That night, as the old year waned, the house filled with music, laughter, and the warmth of community. A fiddle player from a nearby ranch provided lively tunes that set feet tapping and inspired impromptu dancing. Children darted between adults, flushed with excitement at being allowed to stay up past their normal bedtimes. Josie moved among the guests, accepting congratulations and good wishes, her eyes frequently seeking out Yates across the room. Just before midnight, Yates called for quiet and raised his glass in a toast. "To endings and beginnings," he said, his gaze finding Josie in the crowd. "To the end of a year that brought both sorrow and joy, and to the beginning of a new chapter filled with hope and love." "To endings and beginnings," the guests echoed, raising their own glasses. As the grandfather clock in the corner began to strike 12, Yates made his way to Josie's side. With each resonant chime, he moved closer, until on the final stroke he stood before her, his eyes reflecting the candlelight and something more a promise, a future. "Happy New Year, Miss Sinclair," he murmured, bending to brush his lips against hers in a brief but tender kiss. "Your last night with that name." "Happy New Year, Mr. Turner," she replied, her voice soft with emotion, "and happy wedding day." The morning of January 1, 1879, dawned bright and cold, sunlight sparkling on fresh snow that had fallen during the night. Josie woke early, her stomach fluttering with anticipation. Today she would become Yates Turner's wife, joining her life to his in a covenant before God and their community. Emma and Martha helped her dress in her transformed blue gown, arranging her hair in a simple but elegant style adorned with the silver comb Yates had given her for Christmas. Sarah contributed a small bouquet of pine sprigs and dried flowers that she had gathered and arranged herself. "You look beautiful, Josie," Emma said, blinking back tears as she stepped back to admire her handiwork. "Like a true bride." Josie turned to the small mirror above her dresser, hardly recognizing the young woman who gazed back at her. Gone was the gaunt, worn coal miner with dirt-smudged skin and hopeless eyes. In her place stood a bride with flushed cheeks, bright eyes, and a smile that couldn't be suppressed. "Are you nervous?" Emma asked. Josie considered the question. "A little," she admitted, "but not about marrying Yates." "That feels right. I'm nervous about being a good wife, about helping him run the ranch properly." "You'll learn together," Martha assured her, patting her hand. "That's the beauty of marriage, you grow into it day by day." A knock at the door announced Daniel, dressed in his Sunday best with his hair slicked down with water. "The preacher's here," he reported importantly, "and Yates is pacing up and down in the great room like a caged mountain lion." Josie laughed, picturing her soon-to-be husband's nervous energy. "Tell him I'll be down directly." The ceremony itself was simple but deeply meaningful. Josie descended the stairs on Daniel's arm, her heart swelling at the sight of Yates waiting for her before the fireplace, his expression a mixture of awe and adoration as he watched her approach. The preacher, a kindly older man named Reverend Thompson, conducted the service with warmth and sincerity. When it came time for the vows, Yates's voice rang out clear and confident. "I, Yates Turner, take thee, Josie Sinclair, to be my wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better, for worse, for richer, for poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish, till death do us part." Josie's voice trembled slightly as she repeated the sacred words, but her commitment was no less firm. When Yates slid a simple gold band onto her finger to join her mother's pearl ring, she felt a sense of completion, of rightness. "By the authority vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife," Reverend Thompson declared. "What God has joined together, let no man put asunder. You may kiss your bride." Yates's kiss was gentle but thorough, prompting good-natured cheers from the assembled guests and a theatrical ugh from Daniel that broke the solemnity of the moment and set everyone laughing. The celebration that followed was joyful and relaxed, a communal dinner, music and dancing, and the sharing of stories and well wishes for the newly formed Turner family. As the afternoon waned, guests began to depart, knowing that the mountain roads would be challenging to navigate after dark. By evening, only the immediate household remained. Joe and Martha had taken the younger children to their home for the night, giving the newlyweds privacy for their first evening as husband and wife. Even Emma had gone with them, after embracing Josie with tears in her eyes and whispering, "I'm so happy for you, Josie. He's a good man." Alone in the great room, Josie and Yates sat side by side before the fire, her hand in his, the gold band on her finger catching the flickering light. "Mrs. Turner," Yates said softly, testing the sound of her new name, "my wife." "It still doesn't seem quite real," Josie admitted. From coal miner to rancher's wife in 6 months. Yates lifted her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. "Real as the ground beneath our feet, real as this house around us, real as my love for you." Josie turned to face him, reaching up to trace the strong line of his jaw with gentle fingers. "And mine for you," she whispered. "I never expected to find this, Yates, never dared to hope for it." "Nor I," he admitted. "After Eliza died, I thought that part of my life was over. I built this ranch, created this home, but it was empty, until you and the children came. And now," his smile was tender as he drew her closer, "now it's complete, now it's truly home." When he kissed her this time, there was no audience to restrain his ardor, no children to interrupt. Josie yielded to the wave of emotion that swept through her, secure in the knowledge that this man, her husband, would cherish and protect her, would stand beside her through whatever challenges life might bring. Later that night, as snow fell softly outside their bedroom window and the ranch lay quiet under its white blanket, Josie nestled in the protective circle of Yates's arms, her head pillowed on his chest. "What are you thinking?" he murmured, his fingers tracing idle patterns on her bare shoulder. "That I'm grateful," she replied honestly. "Grateful for the path that led me here, even the difficult parts. If I hadn't needed to work in the mine, we might never have met." "We would have," Yates said with certainty. "One way or another, our paths would have crossed." "Some things are meant to be, Josie," she smiled in the darkness, content to believe him. "Then I'm grateful it happened sooner rather than later." "As am I," he agreed, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Every day with you is a gift I don't intend to waste, even when I burn the biscuits." She teased, remembering a kitchen disaster from the previous week. "Even then," he assured her with a chuckle, "though perhaps especially when you're wearing that determined expression as you beat another batch of dough into submission." Josie swatted his chest playfully. "You're impossible." "Impossibly in love with my wife," he corrected, capturing her hand and bringing it to his lips. As she drifted toward sleep in the warmth of his embrace, Josie's last conscious thought was one of wonder at the journey that had brought her to this moment of perfect contentment. From the darkness of the coal mine to the light of love, a transformation as profound as it was unexpected, the new life that began that January day blossomed with the passing seasons. Winter gave way to spring, bringing calving season and long days of work for Yates and his men. Josie threw herself into learning the rhythms of ranch life, managing the household with increasing confidence while also helping with lighter outdoor tasks when needed. Emma, now 13, divided her time between assisting Josie and continuing her education through books that Yates ordered specially from Denver. Daniel, approaching 11, became Yates's shadow whenever school wasn't in session, absorbing ranching knowledge with an enthusiasm that made the adults exchange knowing glances. Sarah, growing out of her babyish ways at 8, developed a particular affinity for the chickens and garden, taking pride in gathering eggs and tending the vegetable plots under Martha Carson's guidance. By summer, there were visible signs of the changes in their lives. The main house, once Spartan in its furnishings, became truly homey with the addition of curtains sewn by Josie and Emma, braided rugs for the wooden floors, and family photographs displayed prominently on the mantel. The most significant change, however, became apparent in late June, when Josie confirmed what she had begun to suspect. She was expecting a child of her own. Yates's reaction to the news was everything she could have hoped for: joy, tenderness, and immediate concern for her well-being. He insisted on riding to Cannon City himself to consult with Doc Williams, returning with advice on diet and rest that he made sure Josie followed, sometimes to her amused exasperation. "I'm pregnant, not ill," she reminded him one evening when he tried to prevent her from carrying a basket of laundry upstairs. Women have been having babies since the beginning of time, most while continuing to work right up until delivery. Not my wife, Yates declared firmly, taking the basket from her hands. Not when I can help with these tasks. His protectiveness only increased as her condition became more visible. By fall, when Josie's slender frame had rounded substantially with the growing child, Yates had taken to watching her like a hawk, stepping in to lift, carry, or otherwise assist at every opportunity. The children, too, were excited about the impending arrival. Emma helped prepare a nursery in the room adjacent to the master bedroom, sewing tiny garments and soft blankets. Daniel constructed a wooden cradle under Yates's guidance, his face serious with concentration as he carefully sanded each piece smooth. Sarah collected soft feathers to stuff a small pillow, declaring that her new brother or sister would have the most comfortable bed in Colorado. As winter approached once more, bringing with it the anniversary of their arrival at Turner Ranch, Josie often found herself reflecting on the extraordinary journey of the past year. One evening in early December, as she sat by the fire knitting a small cap for the baby, she shared these thoughts with Yates. "Do you ever think about what might have happened if you hadn't offered me that job?" she asked. "Where we might be now?" Yates, who had been reading a ranching journal in the chair opposite hers, set the publication aside. "I try not to," he admitted. "The thought of you still down in that mine, or of this house still empty of laughter and love, it's too painful to contemplate." "Sometimes I think it was divine intervention," Josie mused, her hands continuing their rhythmic work with the knitting needles. "That God put you in my path just when I needed help the most." "I prefer to think he put you in mine," Yates countered with a smile. "I was the one living half a life before you came." Josie returned his smile, her free hand moving to rest on her swollen belly where the baby had just kicked. "Either way, I'm grateful." Christmas that year was a joyful affair, made more special by the knowledge that next year they would celebrate with a new family member. The holiday tree glowed with candles and ornaments, presents were exchanged with love and laughter, and the great room rang with carols sung around the piano that Yates had secretly ordered from Denver as a gift for Emma, who had shown musical talent. As the new year approached, bringing with it their first wedding anniversary, Josie's time drew near. Doc Williams had been alerted to remain close at hand, and Martha Carson spent more time at the main house, ready to assist when labor began. The morning of January 2, 1880, dawned clear and cold, much like their wedding day a year earlier. Josie woke before sunrise with the unmistakable pangs of labor beginning. She lay quietly for a moment, not wanting to wake Yates too soon, knowing the day ahead would be long. But as if sensing her thoughts, he stirred beside her, his arm tightening around her waist. "Josie, are you all right? The baby's coming," she told him, her voice steady despite the flutter of nervousness in her stomach. Yates was instantly alert, sitting up and lighting the lamp beside their bed. "Are you certain? Should I send for Doc Williams now?" Josie smiled at his anxious expression. "There's time yet. First babies typically take a while." "But yes, you should let Martha know, and perhaps send someone for the doctor within the next hour or so." The day that followed was indeed long, filled with hours of increasing discomfort as Josie's body prepared to bring new life into the world. Yates remained close by, though tradition dictated he stay out of the birthing room once labor intensified. Instead, he paced the hallway outside their bedroom, his face growing more strained with each hour that passed. Emma, who had been allowed to remain with Josie along with Martha and the doctor, occasionally emerged to reassure him. "She's doing well, Yates," she reported late in the afternoon. "Doc Williams says everything is progressing normally." But as evening approached and Josie's labor intensified, Yates's worry grew. The sounds of her pain, muffled though they were by the closed door, tore at his heart. When a particularly sharp cry reached his ears, he could stand it no longer. "I need to be with her," he told Joe Carson, who had come to keep him company during the wait. Without waiting for a response, Yates strode to the bedroom door and entered. The scene inside was one of focused activity. Doc Williams stood at the foot of the bed, his sleeves rolled up, giving quiet instructions to Martha, who was arranging clean linens. Emma sat beside Josie, holding her hand and wiping her forehead with a damp cloth. And Josie herself, pale and exhausted, lay propped against pillows, her hair dark with sweat. "You can't be in here," Doc Williams began, but Yates ignored him, moving swiftly to Josie's side. "I'm here," he said simply, taking her free hand in his. "I'm right here with you, sweetheart." Josie's eyes, glazed with pain, focused on his face. "Yates," she whispered, "I was hoping you'd come. Wild horses couldn't keep me away," he told her, pressing a kiss to her damp forehead. "You're doing beautifully, my brave girl." Doc Williams, seeing the immediate calming effect Yates's presence had on his patient, relented. "Since you're here, make yourself useful. Help her sit up more for the next contraction. It's almost time to push." The next hour was the most intense of Yates's life as he supported Josie through the final stages of labor. He murmured encouragement in her ear, braced her back as she pushed, and wiped tears from her face when the pain became almost too much to bear. And then, just as the grandfather clock downstairs began to strike 7, a new sound filled the room, the indignant wail of a newborn taking its first breath. "It's a boy," Doc Williams announced, holding up the tiny red-faced infant. "A fine, healthy son." Yates stared in wonder as the doctor quickly cleaned the baby, wrapped him in a soft blanket, and placed him in Josie's waiting arms. The child's cries subsided as Josie cradled him close, her exhausted face transformed by a radiant smile. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tracing a gentle finger down the baby's cheek. "We've been waiting for you." Yates found himself unable to speak, overcome by the magnitude of the moment. His son, their son, was here, perfect and whole, a miracle of new life. "Would you like to hold him?" Josie asked, looking up at Yates with love shining through her fatigue. Carefully, reverently, Yates took the small bundle from her arms. The baby weighed almost nothing, yet he felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders as he gazed down at the tiny face. Dark blue eyes blinked up at him, unfocused but alert. "Welcome to the world, son," Yates said, his voice husky with emotion. "You are so very loved already." "What shall we call him?" Josie asked. They had discussed names during her pregnancy but hadn't settled on a final choice. Now, looking down at the child in his arms, Yates knew. "William," he suggested. "After my father, and James after yours. William James Turner." "William James," Josie repeated, testing the sound. "It's perfect, we'll call him Will." Martha discreetly ushered Emma from the room to give the new family a moment of privacy. Doc Williams followed after assuring them that both mother and child were doing well and promising to return in the morning to check on them. Alone with his wife and newborn son, Yates sat carefully on the edge of the bed, one arm around Josie's shoulders, the other still cradling Will. "Thank you," he said simply, pressing a kiss to her temple. "For this gift, for our family, for everything." Josie leaned against him, her eyes heavy with exhaustion but bright with happiness. "Who would have thought," she murmured, "when you found me coming out of that coal mine that we'd end up here?" Yates smiled, remembering that first meeting the coal-smudged young woman with determined eyes and a wary expression. "I knew you were special from the first moment I saw you," he told her. "I just didn't know how completely you would change my life. For the better, I hope," Josie teased. "In every possible way," he assured her, his gaze moving from her face to their son's. "You've given me everything I never knew I needed." As the winter night deepened outside their window, the small family remained in their bubble of warmth and love, the beginning of a new chapter in a story that had started in hardship but blossomed into joy. The years that followed brought many changes to Turner Ranch. Will grew from a robust infant into a curious toddler with his father's blue eyes and his mother's determined spirit. The ranch prospered under Yates's careful management, expanding to include additional pastureland and a larger herd. Emma, Daniel, and Sarah flourished in the stable, loving environment, each developing their unique talents and interests. And Josie, the coal miner's daughter who had once worked in darkness to support her siblings, found herself living in light, the light of love, family, and hope for the future. On a warm summer evening 5 years after their wedding, Josie and Yates sat on the porch of their home, watching as the sun set behind the distant mountains. Emma, now 18 and recently graduated from the Teachers College in Denver, played the piano inside, the music drifting through the open windows. Daniel, 15 and already showing the makings of a fine rancher, was helping Miguel bring in the horses for the night. Sarah, 13 going on 20, sat on the steps reading aloud to Will and his 2-year-old sister, Catherine Emma Turner. "It's a good life, isn't it?" Yates said softly, reaching over to take Josie's hand in his. "The best," she agreed, her gaze sweeping over the thriving ranch and the family they had built together. "Far better than I ever dared to dream." As twilight deepened into dusk, stars began to appear in the vast Colorado sky, the same stars that had witnessed their journey from strangers to lovers to partners in life. And in the gentle breeze that rustled the cottonwoods by the creek, Josie could almost hear the echo of a truth she had learned through experience. Sometimes the darkest minds lead to the brightest futures, and the hardest paths bring us exactly where we're meant to be.